Hey everyone, Serious podcast here. Actually serious, and real. I want to talk about heroes versus villains. Black and white circumstances. So, as an introduction, we know comic book heroes and villains, both fictitious yet relatable. So how do we recognize the works of heroes or villains in a world of perceptions that sways our discernments? Common sense. As they say, common sense isn't common, and who are they? They, the heroes in everyday life who recognize the holes in groupthink and theories and are willing to step in to say something. The villains in everyday life would create more holes in order to run away and hide, slowing down those who would attempt to discover common sense, and therefore the settling down would be thwarted, tiring the weakest and even strong thinkers, or unable to unmask the very root, embedded fears and prideful malice guarding hearts of hatred. Why isn't common sense common? Common sense isn't common because it isn't named properly or doesn't house the right facts that apply to the attributes of what is common or sensible. Common sense is evasive in day-to-day life as change is constant. Learning means changing, and institutionalized learning requires a rubric that must be followed per the agenda. What does common sense have to do with being heroic, and what does it have to do with villainy? So both heroes and villains have IQs, EQs, and multiple types of quotients that raises many questions against what is common, as well as what is unknown. Heroes and villains alike are responsible for exploring the questions, answers, problems, solutions, and so they, in abstract and real-world ways, have an influence, a voice, a slice of the shared common sense pie that seems endless, eliminating what is quote-unquote common every time of every day and bright night. Heroes and villains are responsible for the agendas that either perpetuate commonality or what has not yet been known. Some would see as insanity during the processes of exploration. Perceptions beneath discernments. Why do people get stuck on perceptions? Why do the things we perceive sometimes seem to trick us and feed our fears? As we grow up, from babies to toddlers to children to teenagers, and young adults to older adults, and quote-unquote matured adults to elderly adults, going through all these categorized stages, we get used to these categories being defined and misconstrued or abused. You know, a couple examples here, a few examples: bullying of olders to the youngers, bullying of youngers to the olders, setting age gaps that promote a nagging amount of observations, scaling towards the quote-unquote taboo regions of the charted minds. And there are taboos, in all societies. Getting back on course, the frontal lobe's developments are not always so easily measurable, and we chart our minds to be more secure about the sources of all information and creations. Being aware is scary, yet invaluable, and being humble or in a state of mind where perceptions can be drawn into discernments is important. People get stuck on perceptions without discernment, when they've already secretly made discernments without the adequate amount of perceptions. To make a discernment, this is an aside, to make a discernment that matches with the ultimate truth, reality, the time fragments that connect to each other. And I might speak on that in another podcast, but bear with me here. Let's go back to this. And this may create a feedback loop of false validations. Discerning those perceptions is paramount for some people, dipping into the memory of MBTI and the Jungian typology world, socially sensationalized as a form of astrology, yet deeply acknowledgeable when compared to neurological studies or more physical researches via socionics. People who discern quickly, who judge quickly, whether or not they absolutely decide on all matters, may find the world of perception to be scary or perhaps a chore, preferring to dominate as hero or villain in their respective agendas, societies, organizations, and professions. It's common sense to want to verify someone as being good versus bad, mean versus nice, so on and so forth. However, it is not so common to peer into the libraries involved with perception for each individual. As an aside, the libraries of the mind. What has a person read? What have they seen? What have they experienced? Going back to the podcast here, how often do people ask questions, and can it be easily determined when someone is a hero or villain, or if the conglomerate of quote-unquote lies and quote-unquote conspiracies are heroic or villainous? Having an answer for the placed question is common. And what else is it next to truth? The verified physical object, documentation, or perhaps the confirmable entity of existent feelings as actions take place, or inactions, as an aside. What are the individual rubrics? Why are heroes and villains both capable of being wrong at their roots? Imagine roots or tree branches like a flowchart of knowledge and perhaps neurological, physiological developments. When a knowledge base in an individual or group lacks updates, there will be a lack of awareness in the now and in the future of decision making, if there is anything new to be learned in that given moment. And there will always be something you can learn, whether it's from what you're thinking about or from what you see around you or hear around you, as an aside. Heroes play a tough game in their comic book web of ideas, all influenced, updated, and filtered by the companies that contain their writers. Villains are no different, albeit their placements into the shadows, underworld, and regions of neurotypical people that may be realized as hate, intense dislike, sabotaging, and self-destructive behaviors makes their roles more obvious for the common and neurotypical people who are quote-unquote commonly unaware of what they feel deep down inside, or for the potentially villainous. Why? I conclude with this. Are heroes and villains easy to discern just because we want to forego our own responsibilities of recognizing our own behaviors and acknowledging and healing from the wounds of the past that pull us closer to the truth and further away from written, outdated realities? We may conclude that what we judge being up to us stubbornly and openly may need corrections. Holes in our life decisions, when filled properly, are akin to the healing process, underlining our complete and unadulterated truths, our significant truth. Truth, be told, even a physical choice made to imprint the fragments of our dimensions, our time dimensions, as an aside, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, so on and so forth, isn't black nor white. With no hero and no villain, we face a time of hopelessness. And that's the deepest sensation available for all of us, quote-unquote, growing human vessels. Congratulations.